Before we get started, I thought I would encourage you to take a second and just let yourself breathe and rest for a moment. It's been a stressful week. All across the country, we're still dealing with a pandemic. And on the Gulf Coast, we've been dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Sally, and that continues even to this day. It has not been easy. Many of us have been without power and without a way to communicate with each other. But slowly and surely those things are being restored. But it's important to take a moment. So just concentrate on what it feels like to breathe in and out slowly. And take a minute for yourself. And we'll start in just a second. The Holy Gospel of Jesus Christ, according to Matthew. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. When he went out again, at about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, 'Why are you standing here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' And he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, 'Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first.' When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?' So the last will be first, and the first will be last." As a laborer, in the first century and around the area where Jesus was from, you were up with the sun. And sometimes before, it was time to go into town and look for work. There were mouths to feed and taxes to pay. The Romans always taxing more and more. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. If you didn't work a day, well, you didn't eat. Neither did your family. The hot Mediterranean sun was already producing sweat across your brow as you waited for an opportunity to make a day's wage. And down the road, you recognize a wealthy landowner approaching. Thank God. A day's work. Your anxiety starts to subdue, and you even manage a smile as you head to meet the landowner with the other laborers who had gathered so you can negotiate the day's wages and get to work. He offers a denarius. It's pretty standard. And it'll do. This guy seems pretty trustworthy and has a decent reputation. So you head out into his vineyard and you start what will be a long, hot, tiring day of work, tending to these vines in the sweltering heat. When you get a look at the vineyard, you realize it is huge. This guy is going to need more workers for sure. All day long, working out in the sun, very few breaks, only a little water, and every few hours more and more workers arrive, all throughout the day. A few hours before it's time to knock off and head home, the last group of workers arrives. And you feel sorry for them because they barely have enough time to work and get paid enough to take care of their needs. It's almost not worth it. And you start to question the landowner's management skills. Finally, it's time to head home. Everyone will be so relieved that you found a full day's work. Everyone gathers around the foreman, and the poor guys who showed up last get paid first. There's some sort of commotion at the table where the money changes hands, and one of the latecomers passes you and he holds up a shiny denarius. What? A whole day's pay for just a few hours' work? Wow. Talk about luck. And wait a second. If they got paid a full day's wage, imagine. That means you're about to strike it rich. Each group walks up to get paid, from the ones who came the latest down to your group. And each one, every person, gets a day's wage, a denarius. Finally, it's your turn. Now it's time to see some big money. The foreman reaches into his bag and pulls out a denarius, a day's wage. That's it? Surely there must be some kind of mistake. We were out here all day, breaking our backs for you, and you're going to pay us the same as those guys who barely were here at all? They didn't do anything. They don't deserve it. We get taught at an early age that if you want to get ahead in life, you have to work for it. Sometimes a very few people get handed life on a silver platter. But even in those situations, somewhere down the line, someone had to work to get what others enjoy. We value work and busyness in our culture like no other society. A while back, the Dalai Lama was asked what surprised him most about humanity. And he said, "What most surprises me is man, because he sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. And then he is so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present. The result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he is never going to die, and then dies having never really lived." Because for generations and generations we have idolized the individual drive to succeed and pile up our storehouses, we have slowly chipped away at one of the foundational realities of life. And that is this: because we are all beloved children of God, we are all dependent upon God for our entire existence. Sure, when life rolls on without tragedy, we get lulled into believing that we are the ones who are providing all our needs. And if we can manage to put bread on our tables by the sweat of our brows, if we can buy cars and houses and clothes and braces and everything else that it takes to live, surely we can care for our spiritual needs too. Surely we can be good enough to do enough for God to approve of us and love us. But today, with the backdrop of 2020 and all of its challenges hanging over us, we have a divine opportunity to see clearly how we are sustained only by the love of God. When we get confused and imagine that somehow all of our hard work is responsible for where we are in life, or what we deserve. It becomes way too easy to get ticked off when someone who hasn't worked like we have receives the same payment we do. And we translate that into how God gives out love and forgiveness. It's offensive to our human sensibilities. We flatly reject the idea that we are not capable of working our way up the ladder of God's love. We hold on so tightly to the way our world works, and we project that onto the way we think God works. Since when have we ever been called to put limits on the love of God? Put yourself again in the shoes of the laborer who worked all day for his wage. You're incredulous that everyone got the same pay, insulted even. You're not like those latecomers who were too lazy to even get a decent day's work. Why would the master of the house waste his money paying everyone the same? And suddenly you notice that he's been listening to you this whole time. And he calls out to you, "Hey, friend, didn't we agree you would get paid a day's wage? I haven't shorted you. Am I not allowed to do what I want with my money? Or are you envious because I am generous?" How far do we have to go in order to respond negatively when someone receives generosity from God? Especially someone who we don't think deserves it. Matthew's gospel is clear over and over again. Our ways, our rules, the way we put our society together is not God's way. It's not God's rules, not God's society or God's economy. This is why our allegiance must be to Christ above all else. Not just because it sounds good to say it. We must belong to Christ above all other things because every other system is flawed and temporary. Every other answer to life we have come up with is currently failing or will eventually fail. But the way of love, the way of Christ, unmerited favor, unearned generosity, infinite love, it is the only thing that will last. Not only will the way of love never fail us, it has already finished the job. The infinite love of God is the only reality, and we just spend our lives figuring out that all we can do is fall headlong into that rescuing, redeeming, rewarding love that makes all things new. There's nothing like a hurricane to put you back in touch with just how much we depend on God, even for the basics. But it won't take long for the wheels of society to start spinning again. Even now, power is coming back on all over. Communications are coming back online. In a month or so, we'll forget how uncomfortable we were without air conditioning. We might forget the warm glow of candles and the sound of chainsaws echoing through our neighborhoods. By Halloween, we will be back to business as usual, as much as possible in a pandemic. But we can take this little bit with us, that we have been called into the vineyard. May we not be compelled to work by how much we will get paid, but by the infinite generosity of God who gives love without limit. May we extend that same generosity to everyone. just as it has been extended to us. Amen.